However, I would like to know what someone else, who may be very different from me, thinks about an issue as novel as trans rights and transphobia. Someone who's trans, maybe. Well, you asked for it, so here I am. Hi there, I'm Cameron. Inspired by the various Transguy YouTubers that I watch, I've decided to also become a YouTube commentary channel because why not? I have a lot of thoughts, and I thought I should share them with you. Which brings us to today's topic. If you've been online recently, you may have seen this Today Online article called "This is Why I Don't Want to Be Woke. Don't Cancel Me for It" by Teoh. I think I like to preface this by saying that I hate the word woke. I think it's really annoying. I think people that use the word woke in reference to other people also use the term SJW with it, which is another phrase that I hate. I don't think anyone actually calls themselves woke anymore, or if anyone did that in the first place. Anyway, you're gonna be hearing that word a lot, so if you're annoyed by it like me, brace yourselves. Another thing I should mention is that this article was done as an assignment for one of Dana's classes, and her teacher thought that it was so good that it should be published on Today. Her teacher, I quote, says that she thought the article was brave to be so direct about calling out the negative effects of the woke culture and for using the transgender issue as an example. Her teacher has released a whole column online in response to the the bullying vitriol, as she's put it, in response to Dana's article. I'm not on social media much, so I don't exactly know all the responses that it's gotten, but from all the Twitter threads that I've seen, all the comments are pretty well-constructed criticism. So, but if there is bullying, okay, fair enough. I think if I break down all that was said in that column, it will be a whole nother video. So if you guys would like to see that, please comment below. So I'm a trans guy, and since Dana chose to write about my community as a subtopic for her article, I think it's only fair that I get to have a response. So let's begin. Being hella woke is foolish. Lower your pitchforks and hear me out. Maybe I should buy a pitchfork. Just to stand by in case. There are some aspects of the woke movement I genuinely applaud. For example, cancelling slurs like the S word, the F slur, and the T slur. Language shapes how we think and consequently how societies function. In cancelling words and phrases that perpetuate negative stereotypes, women should not be sexually promiscuous, being gay or transgender is not derogable, I believe we are making the world a better place. I do agree with the second half of her paragraph, however, I think it's pretty contradictory for her to say such a thing when in the first sentence she writes, all these slurs, uncensored. I know she's citing it, so technically she's not saying it, but she could have used the misogynistic slur, the homophobic slur, the transphobic slur. Something more tactful than outright saying it. I genuinely flinched when I read those words because those words still have a very negative effect and they're still being used. Mind you, I am a gay trans man and I find it hard for me to say the F slur and the T slur publicly. Even as a person that can technically reclaim these words, I feel uncomfortable saying them. So I don't understand how Dana, a cishet woman, was comfortable enough to say these words without any censorship. What I cannot get on board with is the cancelling of people and organizations for believing or saying something that opposes the woke stance, whatever the issue. The push for kinder and more inclusive norms should not entail condemning dissenters. So while this whole sentence is pretty vague on whether this is referring to the trans rights issues, I think it's fair to assume, given the subtopic of the article, that she's referring to trans activists versus transphobes, and transphobes are the dissenters in this case. So I think it's worth acknowledging that dissenters, in the case of transphobes or queerphobes in general, aren't usually the ones being condemned, they're the ones doing the condemning. Also, dissenters, as in people with varying opinions from the common opinion. I don't know where you have been, but in Singapore especially, trans allies and trans people are not the majority. In fact, I think it's fair to assume that transphobes are the majority of Singaporeans. I've included a screenshot of J.K. Rowling's fall from grace in 2020. Oh great. So here we have a tweet from J.K. Rowling that goes, "People who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for these people. Someone help me out. Wumben, wimpen, woomad." She just had to use like the most mocking tweet J.K. Rowling had. Like throughout the whole trans debate with J.K. Rowling had much more coherent and calm tweets that she posted. I don't know why she used the most passive-aggressive one as her example. The tweet exploded. It was quoted, retweeted with their own response, mostly negative, over 33,000 times, and a whole bunch of news media outlets picked up the story, reporting it with woke undertones. Read, J.K. Rowling was so wrong for this. Okay, so I tried to find that article, but all I could find was an op-ed titled, "J.K. Rowling got it wrong," posted on CNN. Emphasis on op-ed, as in this wasn't an objective news report that the CNN did, it was an opinion post. So if your point was that these news media outlets were cancelling J.K. Rowling, I would need some proof. Additionally, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequence. Don't you think it was a little wrong for J.K. Rowling to post this? Look at the language she uses. She's clearly using a mocking tone. There's not much room for civil discussion. A year later, she seems to be lying low. I haven't seen her name in a while. That is insane to me. Can we no longer have discussions? To what extent are we going to take this cancelling, in brackets, extreme censorship? You know, people have lives. Maybe J.K. Rowling is working on her new upcoming transphobic book. I checked this. She's not banned from Twitter. She could come back any moment now and sprout some new tough bullshit. Her transphobic tweets are still publicly viewable. They haven't been deleted at all. Her books are still selling. Her movies are still being played. She won a freaking award for her transphobic essay. So don't give me this bullshit that she's been censored in any way. She hasn't. Perhaps Miss Rowling phrased her sentence in a less than tactful manner. Perhaps. But she was trying to say something, wasn't she? She was trying to say that to her, in her personal opinion, trans women are distinct from cis women. Cis is a term referring to a person who identifies with their birth gender. First of all, that's not all this tweet is about. It's not just about trans women and cis women. It's about J.K. Rowling being upset that the phrase "people who menstruate" was being used instead of just women. Which, newsflash, some women don't menstruate. I'm not just talking about trans women. I'm talking about cis women that have gone through menopause, have had their wombs surgically removed due to whatever health reasons, and that are on birth control and no longer have their periods. They're still women, just women that don't menstruate. JK's transphobia is just making her ignore the fact that people who menstruate is a more specific term than women. I just also like to point out that some trans men and some non-binary people also menstruate. I don't know why ignorant people only ever think about trans women when debating anything trans. Because we're here too. Going back to the article, Rice Media had actually posted a commentary on Dana's article. They beat me to it. And they mentioned that this tweet was taken pretty out of context. Like I said before, JK was already spewing a lot of transphobic shit before this, so you can't just say that this tweet was about the differences between cis women and trans women. It was way more. Okay, derailing a bit, but let's continue with the article. And at the risk of getting cancelled, I'm going to say that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, believing, and perhaps even convincing some people that what she thinks is true. Everyone is entitled to the freedom of thought, if not of speech. There's nothing wrong with saying that trans women and cis women are different. That's why they have the prefix anyways. They're different because they have different experiences, but both are still women. And if you haven't been following, J.K. Rowling not only thinks that trans women aren't women, but she thinks that they are predators infiltrating women's spaces. And that's the issue here. I myself am not particularly well versed in trans issues, trans rights, and the trans experience overall. I'd say I'm pretty ignorant on the topic. And she's still writing about the topic. I find it really funny that she's aware that she's ignorant and yet she's still posting this. To me, it's just screaming, I didn't bother researching about this, but I'm writing about it and you should totally back me up on it. Also, mind you, her assignment was on woke culture. She technically did not have to write about trans issues at all, but she decided to do it, even though she says herself she's ignorant on the topic. For me, it's kind of shifting the blame of cancel culture onto the trans community. And why do that? Because we're already such a marginalized community. Because the scope of cancel culture can actually range from a lot of topics: racism, misogyny, abuse, etc. So why choose trans issues specifically, even when you're so uneducated on the topic? A better approach she could have taken that would have made her article more cohesive would be talking about Twitter mob mentality. Because to me, that's the most relevant thing when I'm thinking about cancel culture or woke culture. But as a young person who lives on the internet, I would never ever admit that I think being transgender is a little out there for me. Well, you kind of just did admit it, so personally, I think that being cisgender is a little bit out there for me. Like what, you don't have gender dysphoria, people don't misgender you? What's that like? Being transgender is a concept that I, a straight cis person, still grapple with. I do not fully comprehend the trans experience. Hi, editing Cameron here. Between the time I took to record this and the time I took to edit, they've edited out this next sentence for being insensitive. I didn't get a screenshot, but I copied it word for word onto my script document, so I hope that's proof enough for you. I still get weirded out by photos of post-op bodies and still struggle with the argument that trans children should be given hormone blockers. You don't have to comprehend the trans experience to support it. In fact, as a cis person, you'll never truly understand what the trans experience is like. However, that doesn't mean you cannot educate yourself and stand in solidarity with trans people, because that's what compassion and empathy is about. I know I made that joke about cis people being out there for me, but as a trans person, I also cannot relate to the cis experience at all. I don't understand it. However, just because I don't understand the cis experience doesn't mean that I don't support cis people. I don't try to take away their rights. Another thing, you're supposed to be a communications major, yet you're using the phrase weirded out when referring to trans people's bodies. It's a very questionable use of diction and it's a bit tactless. I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she's referring to like freshly post-op bodies, which, for trans guys at least, you see the scars, bandages. I know people can be queasy about that stuff, but weirded out, especially after saying that trans people are out there for you, you'd think she'd be more careful with her words after expressing that she's so scared of being cancelled. However, I would like to know what someone else, who may be very different from me, thinks about an issue as novel as trans rights and transphobia. Someone who's trans, maybe. Well, you asked for it, so here I am. Again, very questionable diction here. Novel. You're using the word novel. The Stonewall riots, which I know weren't like the big bang of trans rights, but it was quite a big catalyst, so I'm just using that as an example. The Stonewall riots were in 1969. Do you know what else was in 1969? The moon landing. You don't see me calling astronauts novel. I have a feeling that this lady thinks that trans rights only became a topic of discussion during like the 2016 American bathroom bills. But I can't even admit that I'd like to know. I understand that the context that this was written wasn't meant for public viewing, but since they did make it for public viewing, I don't understand why they didn't edit these sentences, because they're very ironic now. Because now, even asking can be construed as disagreeing or being unsupportive of the cause, and thus offensive. Since when? I've seen people online that genuinely have no idea what certain trans rights issues are, and they ask nicely and politely, and people kindly educate them. They don't get called out. You know why? Because they phrase their things in a non-judgmental and polite manner. For example, here's a telonym that I received from someone who I technically could claim is ignorant and uneducated. By the way, you can find my telonym on my Instagram at burn.cobalt. I could classify this person as ignorant and uneducated on trans topics. However, they've structured their words in a manner that is polite and that shows genuine concern about the issue with pronouns, so I gave a nice response. I think you are getting backlash because you wrote about trans topics, something that you're uneducated on, and is portrayed in this manner that's like, I want to know more about trans people, but I can't ask them because they're so aggressive and will cancel me, which is not the case. How do you expect to have a civil conversation when you phrase your words like this? To me, it's kind of like playing the victim. And that sucks because we are still all learning about this fairly new phenomenon. Not being transgender, but living openly as a transgender individual. I guess now I'm a phenomenon. At least she knows that being trans isn't a new thing. The bar is low, I know. Anyway, just repeating myself, it's fine to ask questions when you genuinely have no idea and want to know more. What's not fine is publishing an article about trans people without bothering to educate yourself beforehand. In a room full of woke people, I would probably just sit there quietly, smile and nod if someone said, "Children should have access to puberty blockers, no questions asked." What kind of event are you attending? Like the woke seminar, the woke people support group? Stop with these nonsensical hypotheticals, they're not making your argument any stronger. As for not speaking your mind, that's not the fault of your woke culture. Fear is what's stopping you. Sure, nobody likes to receive hate or be called out. But I think that if you genuinely are concerned about certain issues, you should voice your opinions and have that courage to speak out. And that doesn't help the trans community at all. All I'd be doing is pretending to understand and embrace all their choices, a facade erected to mask how ignorant and uncertain I actually am. Technically, in this hypothetical situation, you're not exactly helping the trans community either by speaking up against puberty blockers. Like in this woke seminar, are there any ministers around, parents with transgender children, or pediatricians or anything? My point is that sometimes just talking within like a small group doesn't do much. If we were allowed to speak freely without risking being crucified, I'd ask questions like, there are people who detransition, regret and reverse transitioning. If you halt puberty in children, could that be really bad for them? Because detransitioning already sounds like a complex process. Add in the fact that they never develop fully, would it still be possible to help them detransition? Also, how young is too young? These are good questions, and they're phrased in a polite and non-judgmental manner, which is good. And hence I'm repeating myself again, no one is stopping you from asking these questions. And hey, here you are being published, so no, you haven't been censored by woke culture. Then we'd be able to have a real discussion, instead of just agreeing like sheep. Just FYI, not a lot of people agree like sheep on the whole puberty blockers issue. In fact, puberty blockers are very heavily contended within the trans community itself. Being woke isn't just being sensitive or caring. It also encourages narrow-mindedness and refuses to acknowledge, let alone respect, the mere suggestion of differences in opinion. I really don't get it. This whole time she's talking about woke culture, but she's yet to bring in a good example of someone being cancelled. Sure, she brought in the J.K. Rowling example and said that she received a lot of negative comments. But what were those negative comments? There were too many details missed out for the J.K. Rowling example to make me think that the argument is compelling. So what? So people end up opting for fake niceness over their true opinions, presenting an inauthentic but acceptable version of themselves to you, Mr. Hello Woke. It's actually pronounced Mr. Hila Woke. Again, there's no anecdote here, so I can't really say much. Also, who is Mr. Hello Woke? This character that she's made is an individual person. So is she referring to woke culture as an individual person, or is she implying that it takes as much as one woke individual to silence a non-woke individual? Okay, so brace yourselves, this is kind of where she derails. No, you haven't influenced them. No, they aren't woke like you. But yes, your outrage has created such a climate of fear that no one will ever speak their minds around you. I have no idea what kind of climate she's talking about because online, in the comment sections, have you seen the amount of transphobia that is there? I don't want to pull up any examples, but it's actually quite easy to find. So if you go out there, search for a trans post, just a trans post, okay? There's going to be transphobia in the comments. Congratulations, you're officially in a room full of virtue signalers, who, by the way, may behave badly in private, hurting the communities you so vehemently claim to protect. If only they could be so brave as you, hurting these marginalized communities publicly. My sister pointed out that as the article goes on, she gets more and more bitter. And yeah, I see it, and I don't know whether to laugh or to cry. The fact is, no single individual is capable of gathering all the information there is on any topic. The world and its repositories of information it offers are far too large and complex. Which is why we actually need others to find out about these things, create their own views, and share them with us, even if they come to us with opinions we deem less than savory. Of course, in a perfect world, we will all be single-minded. We would agree on these grey area issues, and everyone would live happily ever after. That's not a perfect world, that's a dictatorship. A perfect world is where people with differing views understand and get along with each other despite their differences. Not some hive mind consciousness, which, in my opinion, that's pretty scary. But we don't live in a world like that. We live in a world where people read, subscribe to, and preach different things. That is the richness of the human experience. Everyone brings something unique to the table. Wokeism. I really just read that.
Isms, in my opinion, are not good. A person should not believe in an ism. He should believe in himself.
Wokeism and cancel culture threaten genuine collaboration and discussion, and subsequently the expansion of thought and knowledge. Taken to an extreme, they are truly a disservice to humanity. But the thing is, you haven't actually talked about the extreme. Again, the J.K. Rowling example, not the best. The woke seminar that you gave, not a real example. So if you're anything like me, I hope you can find the courage to disagree with the mob and speak your mind. Well, seeing as transphobes are kind of like a mob, I'm doing what I've been told here. So maybe I did take away something from this article. And finally, the cherry on top ending sentence. And if you're hella woke, please don't cancel me. Instead of writing, if you have any thoughts on this, I'd love to have a conversation, she just writes, oh no, please don't cancel me. I'm so scared that my actions have consequences. I don't get it. The whole time she's going on about how cancel culture sucks. To me, you think by the end of it she'd have some backbone to say, I don't care if you cancel me. But no, there's no character development in any way. She's just going on about the same thing over and over again throughout this whole piece. In summary, here are my thoughts. Number 1. Cancel culture doesn't exist in the way that she thinks, where someone is immediately silenced after having controversial opinions. In fact, she's allowed to publish this in spite of Mr. Hila Woki watching her 24/7 apparently. Number 2. There was no point in using trans rights and transphobia as a subtopic for your article, especially when you're uneducated on the topic. In fact, if she did the whole thing on Twitter mob mentality, she would have a much more focused and cohesive article. And lastly, number 3, and I think this is the most important. Own up for your own words. When people criticize you, they're not bullying you. They're criticizing you. So, Dana, if you're watching this, I hope this gives you my trans perspectives that you so desperately wanted, even though you didn't bother interviewing any trans individuals prior to posting this. I don't mean any disrespect, please don't take my jokes to heart. They're jokes. I just wanted to make this more entertaining because I thought if this was a whole serious video, it'd be kind of depressing. No, I'm not canceling you. No, I'm not bullying you. I'm genuinely trying to offer proper criticism here to your article. I'm just doing what you told me to. I'm going against the transphobic mob and speaking my mind. And if you genuinely want that conversation with a trans person, I am actually offering it. My email's in the description. You can contact me. We can, have an interview. You can write another article, I guess, and you can grow from it. Well, folks, I hope this was informative or at least entertaining for you. If you want, you can follow me on social media, or the only social media I have, Instagram, @burn.cobalt. Subscribe to my YouTube if you want. Like the video. Dislike the video for all I care. I had some fun doing this. It's been a while since I did some sort of argumentative essay. If you want to see more of this, please tell me in the comments. If you don't want to see more of this, sure, you can also tell me, but I wouldn't really care. Until next time, stay safe, wear your mask, goodbye.